In 1938, Mars invades New Jersey. The new medium of radio adds a terrifying dimension to the War of the Worlds. Halloween Eve, 8 p.m., Orson Welles' Mercury Theater is on the air.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. From the Meridian Room in the Park Plaza Hotel in New York City, we bring you the music of Raymond Raquello and his orchestra. With a touch of the Spanish, Raymond Raquello leads off with La Comparsita.
Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt our program of dance music to bring you a special bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News. At 20 minutes before 8 Central Time, Professor Farrell of the Mount Jennings Observatory, Chicago, Illinois, reports observing several explosions of incandescent gas occurring at regular intervals on the planet Mars.
At first, it seems like an ordinary broadcast of an evening concert, but news flashes in the program grow progressively more frightening.
It is reported that a huge flaming object, believed to be a meteorite, fell on a farm in the neighborhood of Grover's Mill, New Jersey, 22 miles from Trenton. We have dispatched a special mobile unit to the scene. In the meantime, we take you to the Hotel Martinet in Brooklyn, where Bobby Millett and his orchestra are offering a program of dance music.
The original story took place in England, and Orson adapted it to present day and actually then put into it places and street names and locations and geographic regions that were in New Jersey, so that as people heard those names, of course, it added to the realism of it all.
I started to listen and I hear the music, and then another broadcast that they were hitting some town in New Jersey, and then I had opened my eyes and listened.
In 1938, the idea of a fake newscast is unheard of to the listeners at home, who start to become genuinely alarmed. Most have not heard the opening of the show, warning that this is only a drama. As the War of the Worlds program begins on CBS, many Americans are listening to a sketch by Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy on competitor NBC. But when the Charlie McCarthy skit ends at 8:12 p.m., an estimated 6 million listeners switch over to CBS. And what they hear doesn't sound like a dramatization at all.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Carl Phillips again, out at the Wilmot Farm, Grover's Mill, New Jersey. Professor Pearson and myself made the 11 miles from Princeton in 10 minutes.
If you didn't hear that first part, the War of the Worlds, you didn't know what was going on. So a lot of people got excited when they heard it because they sounded like real news flashes at the time.
But I can see the object itself doesn't look very much like a meteor. At least not the meteors I've seen. It looks more like a huge cylinder. Has a diameter of, what would you say, Professor Pearson?
What's that?
What would you say, what's the diameter of this?
About 30 yards.
About 30 yards. Might be almost. Good heavens. Something wriggling out of the shadow like a gray snake. Now it's another one, and another one, and another one. They look like tentacles to me. Oh, yeah, I can see the thing's body now. It's large. As large as a bear. It glistens like wet leather, but hey, ladies and gentlemen, it's indescribable. I can hardly force myself to keep looking at it.
Radio listeners on the East Coast start calling local police and radio stations, but can't get through. The lines are jammed.
The broadcast went on. Geez, they're talking about Plainfield and then Newark. I said, my God, they're coming closer. So I ran next door to Bonnie Walker. I said, are you listening to this on Orson Welles? He said, yeah, I'm listening. Let's go out and look. So we went out. We're looking all over the streets to see they were coming into Bayonne, which is right next door to Hoboken, and we don't see anything.
The streets are dark and deserted, but that's little comfort to the panicked listeners.
And so the fact that, oh my gosh, there aren't any cars on the street, well, that would be a sign to most of us in rational times that it's a quiet night. But for somebody who is inclined to move toward hysteria, no cars on the street means that those people have already been harmed in some way.
Wait a minute, something's happening. A humped shape is rising out of the pit. I can make out a small beam of light against a mirror. What's that? There's a jet of flame springing from the mirror, and it leaps right at the advancing men. It strikes them head on. Lord, they're turning into flames. Now the whole field's caught up by the woods of fire.
Of the 7 million listeners, it's estimated that 1.7 million believe the broadcast is real, and 1.2 million panic. In Grover's Mill, New Jersey, many residents grab their rifles, and a few fire at a local water tower, thinking it is an alien death machine.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a grave announcement to make. Incredible as it may seem, both the observations of science and the evidence of our eyes lead to the inescapable assumption that those strange beings who landed in the Jersey farmlands tonight are the vanguard of an invading army from the planet Mars.
Some people started storing food because of some sort of impending attack. Some people tried to leave the area and gather up the kids and rush out of the city.
Others remain confident that a mobilization of the American military can stop the Martians.
Because, you know, we were going to take care of them because we were Americans, you know. In them days, we heard we won every war there was, like we were in.
Rumors run rampant. Many believe the invasion is not extraterrestrial, but part of the growing threat from the Nazis.
A bulletin is handed me. Martian cylinders are falling all over the country. One outside of Buffalo, one in Chicago, St. Louis.
Finally, at 9 p.m., the attack is over.
This is the end now. Smoke comes out, black smoke. People are trying to run away from it, but it's no use. They're falling like flies. Now the smoke's crossing 6th Avenue, 5th Avenue, 100 yards away. It's 50 feet.
2X2L calling CQ. 2X2L calling CQ, New York. Is anyone on the air?
The eerie silence is followed by an announcement that the program is a dramatization, but it's too late. The hour-long broadcast has convinced millions of listeners that the end is near. When listeners find out they have been duped, there are angry calls for a congressional investigation to prevent future fake news broadcasts. Orson Welles is blamed for the panic.
It's identified with Orson because he was the voice and he did direct the show. It was a product of his directorial talent. But it was a fluke. He never expected to get out of hand that way.
Do you want me to speak now? I'm sorry.
The next day, a contrite Welles addresses the nation.
Of course, we are deeply shocked and deeply regretful about the results of last night's broadcast. It came rather as a great surprise to us that a story, the fine H.G. Wells classic about a mythical invasion by monsters from the planet Mars, should have had so profound an effect upon radio listeners.
I remember now how worried he looked and how pale and sort of frightened.
The FCC began looking into it, but I think there were some commissioners who were concerned about somehow infringing on freedom of speech and radio's creativity, and so there wasn't really much done about it.
And I think that even though Orson Welles had a fairly half-hearted apology, this made him very famous. And when you have fame, you don't apologize too much. But he did say, I don't think we'll try anything like this again.